Welcome to Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills. That's me, where we present clear thinking on confusing topics in challenging times. Today, our show is about the coming general and presidential election in the United States. With Donald J. Trump absurdly leading or breaking even in some polls, what can we do to ensure another Trump presidency does not happen in the United States? And what can we do to advance the efforts of unions, suddenly gaining renewed strength in our nation, to decrease the income disparity and dangerous concentration of wealth and power in the United States, to move the dial in the totally urgent and very rapid manner we need to move it on climate crisis mitigation, and to protect the rights of women, people of color, and especially trans and LGBTQ plus individuals. All this and more with special guests from National Get Out the Vote Operations Force Multiplier and Showing Up for Racial Justice. But first, a brief news update. According to the Grad Student Research Assistant and TA Union, UAW 4811, currently striking at the University of California at Santa Cruz, UC Santa Barbara, and UC San Diego in support of pro-Palestinian protesters, roughly 100 students were arrested at the base of the University of California at Santa Cruz last Friday, March 31st, during a standoff with hundreds of police from throughout Northern California. This started with a middle-of-the-night raid on the pro-Palestine encampment at the university entrance and featured police and CHP officers in full riot gear and fully armed, some without identifying badges nor body cams. Moment of Truth was on campus at 9:30 a.m. Friday while relief officers marched in to replace those who had been there throughout the night. Protesters who had been awake since at least midnight were blocking the street in a standoff with police, and a few were asleep on the ground. Later, many more would be arrested. Today, June 3rd, at the base of campus, speakers at a UCSC picket line rally pegged the number of police on campus at 500 over varying shifts last Friday and said batons, a bag over someone's head, and very tight zip ties were all used on those arrested. The UAW is currently appealing to UC lecturer and faculty staff and unions, the American Federation of Teachers, and the Santa Cruz Faculty Association to withhold submitting grades at the end of the year, which is what forced the UC system to negotiate with UAW strikers 2 years ago. As always, see our show notes at our KSQD program page for links and resources. We have a correction, too. The current UAW strike is not a wildcat strike as previously reported, but a stand-up strike voted on by the union with different campuses standing up to strike at different times. In other news, over 100 San Francisco Bay Area activists took over the Israeli consulate in San Francisco this morning at 9 a.m., with an estimated 50 protesters zip-tied and arrested. To follow this story, go to the Jewish Anti-Zionist Network on Instagram. And now on to our show for today. What should we do? In my view, and I will link to a few of my past Medium articles in our show notes with full documentation, a Trump presidency could be as bad as Chile in 1973 after the Pinochet coup, and perhaps worse. Or more like Russia or Hungary of today. Either way, anti-union, anti-woman, anti-trans in particular, and anti-LGBTQ plus legislation is on the way. In past shows, we have reported on Moms for Liberty and other Christo-fascist groups that seek to roll back liberties for more than half of the people in our nation. Please see the past shows When Fascism Comes to Your Town and Christo-Nationalists in Blue States. With Ron DeSantis as just one representative of the new MAGA-led GOP, the state of Florida has passed legislation to remove even the words climate change in state documents and legislation. In the midst of all this madness, many of us may want to throw up our hands, not even sure where to put our energy and focus. So we are very lucky to have some experts on the show with us tonight to help us figure out what should we do. Tom Halleck is co-chair and one of the founders of Force Multiplier. He is a former book publisher, having worked for many years at Beacon Press, where he was associate publisher. He worked on books by authors such as Reverend William Barber, Mary Oliver, Bob Moses, Robert Reich, Octavia Butler, and others. Laura Weissel is the co-chair of Force Multiplier, having joined the all-volunteer organization in its infancy and within days of her retirement from Harvard Medical School. In 2016, when she started planning her retirement, she anticipated a second career as a volunteer to a variety of local charities. Donald Trump's election foiled those plans. Instead, Laura has been working with Force Multiplier virtually full-time since retirement. We also have Carla F. Wallace on the show with us, who has been part of Organizing for Change in the South for over 40 years with a focus on her home state of Kentucky. She is a co-founder of Showing Up for Racial Justice, also known as SURGE, which moves white people in particular, those who are poor, working class, and rural, to be part of the multiracial struggle for collective liberation. Mentored by Southern civil rights activists in the Black liberation movement and by white racial justice fighter Ann Braden, Carla is also a co-founder of Louisville's Fairness Campaign, which has been nationally honored for the work winning LGBTQ equity by centering racial justice and connecting community organizing and electoral work. Carla has been engaged in international solidarity work for over 4 decades, including leadership in the anti-apartheid movement for a free South Africa and the ongoing work for a free Palestine. Carla, are you there?
Yes, I am, Amy. Thank you so much for having me on.
And you heard me go over the litany of possible ills and some of the current ills that are happening in GOP-led states across the nation around trans rights to health care, around women's rights to choice and to access to abortions and health care. School vouchers are now being redirected toward private religious schools. These are our tax dollars going to private religious schools. So I'm wondering, Laura, what are you seeing in terms of the picture of this country now and what it would look like under a Trump presidency?
Thank you, Amy, for that question. I think that this country under a Trump presidency would be a scary place to live. And so Tom and I and all of us at Force Multiplier are working as hard as we can to make that not a reality. Force Multiplier, we've been around for 7 years. We believe that if you want to make change, progress on climate, on a woman's right to choose, on the future of our democracy, or on any other issue that keeps you up at night, then you have to work as hard as you can to flip the U.S. House, hold the Senate and the White House, and ensure that people can and do vote. Because while the Democrats may not be perfect, at least they usually listen, and they're trying to move forward. I like to use Jamie Raskin's metaphor. He says, politics is like learning to drive. You put the car in D to go forward and R to go backwards.
Let's go to Tom Halleck, who I believe is now on the line with us.
I am, Amy.
Okay.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, sure. So we just heard Laura talk about the dangers to our current society and democracy from a possible Trump presidency, a GOP Congress. Do you want to add to that? And I think it's really interesting to have Carla on with us, too, because I think she represents a slightly sort of more progressive view of the situation. And so we're going to go to that, too. But do you want to add to what Laura said about the current situation in the United States and what a Trump presidency might look like?
Yeah, well, I think, if you care about climate change, abortion rights, voting rights, the humanity of trans people, LGBTQ rights, any of that, you have to care about defeating Donald Trump. And I think that's been our primary goal. But I would just put another spin on it, too, which is it's easy for us to all think about what happens if we lose. But I also want to ask the question, what happens if we win? What kind of world could we be building together to live in for the rest of our lives and also to pass on to our children and grandchildren? We really have the opportunity, and we saw this when the Democrats had control of the House, and White House and Senate, how productive those sessions were, how much they were able to achieve for the American people. So I think we also need to keep that kind of vision of the future that we want in mind as we go into this election cycle.
Yeah, and I want to go to Carla Wallace with Showing Up for Racial Justice. They've been working specifically on electing people of color, people who are pro-ceasefire, I believe. Carla, what are your thoughts about this, that you might have a slightly different view? And I'm glad you're with us to present that view also.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. Well, overwhelmingly, the demographic that is blocking us on climate issues, on racial justice, on gender justice, economic justice, are white people as a demographic. The biggest common denominator in who would vote for a Trump presidency is whether you're white or not. That's the first thing. But we also have a lot of work to do on the Democratic Party. I'm in Kentucky. My state in the late 60s voted Democrat, but the Democratic Party has failed to stand with working people. It has enabled the attacks on trans people. It has been unwilling to take on the issue of race, which is used to divide people. And so the surge approach is also that the Democratic Party needs pushing. I just now got off a phone bank for Jamal Bowman. And in that Democratic primary and the effort to reelect Congressman Jamal Bowman, there is all this MAGA money and Trump money going into his opponent. That's inside a Democratic primary. And so when I think about why we're on the brink of fascism and why we have to defeat Trump, the Democratic Party has really done us no favors in terms of being strong enough for that effort. So I really believe we have to build independent, progressive base through organizing. We believe in the door-to-door and the phone banking, the knocking and talking with people. We're prioritizing rural areas. We're prioritizing white voters who are persuadable and who have been that territory is not covered by the Democratic Party for the most part. And that's a huge issue when it comes to how we're going to defeat Trump.
Tom or Laura, do you have any comments about what Carla just said?
I do. I think, first off, I'm a big fan of Surge. I have friends who work in Surge. I've been on their calls. We've looked at funding Surge, although we're not doing it at the moment. And I think all of us are really allies in a broad coalition, a really anti-fascist coalition. And I think kind of trying to sow division between progressives and moderates within the Democratic Party is unproductive. AOC, Jamal Bowman are in the minority if there isn't a sort of larger coalition that includes moderates, centrists, and even conservatives that you might not vote for in your own district. I live in a very liberal area. A lot of the candidates that we end up supporting aren't necessarily ones that reflect all of my positions on issues, but I understand that what we need is power if we want to achieve any of the larger goals that we have, and that power is going to come from a coalition. And some of the people in that coalition are not going to agree on everything, and we need to be able to work together to do that. And I would just add that if you are dissatisfied with some policies of the Biden administration, right now we have the right to dissent. We have the ability to advocate and try to move a government that we can listen to us. Under Trump administration, we don't have that. So to me, job one is reelecting Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and getting a Democratic Senate and Congress.
We are talking with three different spokespeople for the group's Force Multiplier, which is a national Get Out the Vote organization that concentrates efforts in areas where there can be victories for the Democrats. And we are also talking to someone who is with Surge, which stands for Showing Up for Racial Justice. Her name is Carla Wallace, and she is a co-founder of Surge, which is more focused on recruiting white people, working class, rural white people to join multiracial coalitions in terms of this coming election, which honestly, I find after going through 2016, after going through 2020, I'm finding it hard. I'm just going to be honest. I'm wondering if you guys are finding this too, to get my to get my mind to think about or even think about to get my mind around listening to or dealing with the election at all. I'm going to be doing Get Out the Vote activities myself, but there's a kind of exhaustion that's happened, I think. Laura, do you want to speak to that? Are you finding that at all?
Well, I'm not finding it personally. Frankly, what I'm finding is that people are beginning to realize that they can have an impact on the elections and on the future of their country. And they can do that by, learning about the issues, finding an organization that speaks to them and becoming involved. We're a community of over 9,500 people in all 50 states, and we often hear that where we give people hope because we're doing the research necessary to find the candidates who could help us flip the House, and the Senate candidates who we must reelect if we want to hold on to the Senate. And while I agree that the Democrats aren't perfect, and absolutely, people of color have not been fairly represented in the Democratic Party, and there's so much more work to be done.
Yeah.
But when we win Democratic majorities in Congress and we hold the White House, then we can begin or keep going with that progress. If Donald Trump is elected, he's threatening to deport tens of millions of people. We will see, national abortion bans. Marriage equality will be out the window. Climate change will be denied, and he'll give billions of dollars to the oil and gas industry. So we got to start with the most urgent threat, and then once we've got, as Tom was saying, once we've got a blue Washington D.C., yes, then press for progressive change. But if Donald Trump is reelected, all bets are off.
Yeah, Carla was showing up for racial justice. It feels like we do have to focus on this presidential election. I mean, I'm wondering if you think we can walk and chew gum at the same time at this time and what that looks like, because I know my audience on this show leans left. People are highly critical of the Biden administration, especially around the Israel-Gaza-Palestine war. At this time, we just had 7 students in the studio who had been arrested by 120 police at the UCSC campus who had been camping out for over a month to protest this war and what they are calling a genocide. So I'm wondering, Carla, what do you see in terms of a strategy for both? Because you're talking about we need to push the Democrats and we need to get out the vote. So do you have a different take on this?
Yeah, I actually think we've often been too patronizing of voters. Folks are getting that we need to be pushing Biden on a ceasefire, for example, and we need to defeat Trump. I am absolutely there that we need to build a broad front. But what we're finding is our work, for instance, for the squad defender, we were part of the double-digit victory of Summer Lee in Pittsburgh.
Yep.
That has inspired people to actually be able to say, okay, we're doing this, and that is a push for progressive politics in the Democratic Party. And we have to defeat Trump in November. We are not finding a problem with that.
Okay.
In Georgia, we made over 1 million calls in the last presidential. We were in both the runoffs. We plan to make 1.3 million contacts with voters, and this is just our Georgia work. We plan to help win 128 rural majority white counties. We are all about winning. In Ohio, in the last round, we defeated 4 Moms for Liberty school board candidates in Ohio. We're very serious about winning. And we see that we have to plant the seeds now so that we're moving in a progressive direction after we win in November. We cannot continue to just allow the business as usual of a Democratic Party that just doesn't represent the folks that are always pushed at the margins. And we think that's a winning strategy, to be able to be real with people. Yes, we need to move forward for a more progressive Democratic Party as we're fighting authoritarianism and the potential of fascism.
It's true.
We are not strong enough as a movement to function under a Trump election. So we need to have a Biden to continue the fight for racial justice, gender justice, trans justice, and economic justice.
Thank you. I'm here. I'm actually having all of you on because I want, and from my perspective, I want everyone to plug in. Whether they support centrists at this time or progressives at this time, or whether they need to start to change their minds about things. I don't care. I do feel like we all have to, put our shoulder to the wheel. Right now, if that's the right term, is it the wheel or the rock?
It's either term works. We need a broad, united front against an authoritarian Trump.
Right. So let's
go ahead. Force Multiplier couldn't agree more with everything Carla is saying. What I love about this work, I assume we're all volunteers, is that we're a big tent.
Yes.
The cool thing about the Democratic Party is that it's AOC and Ayanna Pressley, and it's Jared Golden in the most conservative seat held by a Democrat in the U.S. House, because Jared is in a seat that Donald Trump won in rural Maine. He won it in 2016. He won it in 2020, and Jared, a Democrat, is running again, and Trump's going to win that district again. But what Jared tells us, here's where I think, at least at Force Multiplier, we like to think of ourselves as pragmatic progressives. And what Jared says is, look, I'm representing rural Maine. When I vote, 88% of the time, I vote with the administration. If you vote, your alternative is a Republican who would vote with Mike Johnson 100% of the time. In fact, we have this thing called a Marjorie Taylor Greene score. and most of the candidates we're fighting have very high Marjorie Taylor Greene scores. Yeah. Now, I would never want Jared Golden to represent me because I live in a very progressive community, and he would never be elected. But he's the most progressive candidate we're going to get in the most northern part of Maine. And that's the pragmatism we have to embrace, and we have to win. It's about winning, guys.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And Laura, I totally agree. I think often our side misreads the terrain. And you're absolutely right. It's like, until we have the strength to be able to win more progressive leadership, we have to be sober about the terrain and get what we can. I'm totally with you there.
Well, I do want to. Oh, Tom, go ahead. Did you want to add to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I was just going to say that there's another aspect of Force Multiplier's work here. We've talked about our support for candidates, but a lot of our work is also supporting grassroots C4 and C3 groups that are organizing and turning out voters. So one of our main partnerships, for example, is with the Rural Democracy Initiative. And Carla, you were just talking about, making connections with rural voters. So, we are supporting groups like Pennsylvania United and Down Home North Carolina and We the People Michigan and also Galvanize, which like Surge does a lot of work with moderate white women. And so, that's also part of our work, the New Georgia Project, Make the Road Pennsylvania. We see that as part of the work. We know that there are voters for whom Democratic Party and Democratic candidate are not the trusted messengers, that we need groups that are working in the communities year-round, that are working with the communities based on the issues that they have defined as being most important to them, and that these groups are helping people to recognize their interests, advocate for their interests, and use the democratic political process to make their lives better. So that's also part of our work.
Well, I want to, before we go to the second half of the show, which will be in about 5 minutes or so, I do want to lay out some of the highly alarming possibilities under a Trump presidency, which I did talk about at the top of the hour, that it could be anything from a 1973 Pinochet coup type of situation. I really believe that could be true. Mm-hmm. That's something that I see in Donald Trump is this sort of capacity for cruelty that seems to be bottomless. And I think for him to stay in power, he will do almost anything. And so we have this document called Project 2025 that's come out of the Heritage Foundation. I have not had a chance to read that. I'm mostly relying on others to read and interpret and give me the talking points. But have you all read Project 2025? Because this is the blueprint that the GOP, the MAGA-led GOP, has put together for the presidency if Donald Trump or any other Republican, but it looks like it would be Donald Trump in this case, were to win and be in office in 2025. I'm going to open that to anyone who's read it and who can speak to Project 2025.
I mean, I'll start. Go ahead,
Carla, please.
No, I was just gonna say that, what strikes me about that paper is that this has been decades and decades of them honing their ability to continue building a base of white people for their agenda. It's overwhelmingly white folks who are told that the problem is black people, the problem are immigrant people. And if we don't undermine that message by talking directly with white folks about how that divide and conquer is being used, then they will keep making the gains. And I think when we see what's in that paper, let's believe them. This is dangerous stuff. I think we're starting to do with some of our partners scenario planning. And one of the scenarios is that if Biden wins, when Biden wins, let's put it that way, Trump could contest it. Another scenario is Trump wins and he, keeps us from being in the street, but starts implementing a repressive apparatus. That's one of the places I learned my politics. Amy, I appreciate you bringing in Chile. Was a democratically elected government that was undermined with the help of our country.
Yeah, the 1973 coup CIA backed and ousted Salvador Allende and installed Pinochet. And within a few days, everything was completely different in Chile. I mean, Donald Trump has talked about what's the word? My words are failing me this evening. But when you exile people out of the country for protesting, the Gaza war protesters will be exiled from the country. Absolutely. Is what he's already saying. I mean, we saw what happened during the Black Lives Matter protests, where he had unidentified vans and people coming into Portland to just take people off the streets. Right. Go ahead.
So, hi. Sorry to interrupt, but
is this Laura?
It is. Let's think about the alternative here, okay, guys? Let's say it's almost worst scenario, we've lost the White House and we've lost the Senate. We have to flip the House. We must
flip the House.
Hakeem Jeffries, the Speaker of the House. Because for no other reason that we had Leader Jeffries on one of our twice a month Zoom calls last week, and we asked him what would happen if the worst happens, but he's holding the gavel, and he said that he's already in conversation with the military. Now, how's that for a frightening conversation?
Yeah.
But also how reassuring that the Democrats are prepared. There is a plan B. But if he's not the Speaker of the House, oh my goodness. So I would encourage us not to focus on what we can't change, which is that horrific blueprint for destroying democratic norms, but focus on what's possible. And what's possible is flipping just 5 or 6 seats in the House. You know, you've got at least 6 of them in California. We're doing an event with Speaker Pelosi on Zoom. Everyone on this call is invited to join us. I can tell you how in a minute. And she's going to help us raise money for the candidates who are challenging vulnerable Republican incumbents in those seats that were narrowly flipped in 22. Let's flip them back to the Democratic aisle in 24.
We are speaking with 3 people who all are co-founders of Get Out the Vote organizations, including Force Multiplier, and also Showing Up for Racial Justice. Tom Halleck, Laura Weisel, Carla Wallace is with Showing Up for Racial Justice. We will be right back after this break. Welcome back to Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills. And we have 3 people who are doing their very best to get out the vote, to write letters, write postcards, I imagine all these things. And we are going to get into what these specific organizations do and talk about how you can plug in, including, you know, some pointing to some local organizers and groups like Swing Left that are very active locally. But I want to go back and address, because I have been immersed in reporting on the student protests and the war in Gaza. And I have to say that I think people can talk about pragmatism, but people that I have been speaking with, you know, and I agree about the pragmatism. I'm like, you know, this isn't a popularity contest. This is about how do we inch forward a little bit? How do we, or hold the line, right? This is very, very practical. This is very, very much about strategy, this coming election. And I'm all in for making sure Trump doesn't win. But the situation in Gaza and Israel, I mean, an article just came out from Aryeh Nair from in the New York Review of Books, where he's, you know, huge human rights icon, descendant of people who fled the Holocaust, a Jewish man, saying that this is a genocide. The International Court of Justice ruling from January 26th, this is from a Reuters article, at least some of the acts and omissions alleged by South Africa to have been committed by Israel and Gaza appear to be capable of falling within the provisions of the Genocide Convention. The judges said the ruling required Israel to prevent and punish any public incitements to commit genocide against Palestinians. Israel must also take measures to improve the humanitarian situation for Palestinian civilians in the enclave, it said. So people are becoming very cynical because of this war. And I understand that there is so much death and destruction happening, and people are, it seems to me that there's a cataclysm around U.S. military funding, the state of Israel. What is that about? What are we doing there? You know, at the very least, no matter what side you fall on, you can agree that this has been like an earth-shaking catastrophe that's affecting our elections. It's affecting the way people think about the Democrats. You know, our congressional representative Jimmy Panetta has come out with statements, you know, really supporting the state of Israel in this, and yet we have all these students getting arrested up at the UC and people feeling very, very, I mean, most of the polling shows that people are opposed to this war. And so let's go to Tom. Tom, do you have any thoughts about this? How should we be thinking about this? It's just so emotional. And people are feeling very, like a lot of young people. Are you looking at any polls of young people who are saying we're not going to vote for Biden? Because I'm hearing that. I don't know what the polls are showing, especially in swing states.
Well, you're going to give me the easy question.
Someone's got to answer.
Well, yeah, I think it's a real human catastrophe that's unfolding, and you know, I don't want to in any way diminish the pain and anger that people are feeling over that. I think it's I think in President Biden, you have someone who is willing to challenge and push Netanyahu and the Israeli government You saw him doing that the other day, and I think in President Trump, you have someone who would not do that and who would give them a green light to do whatever they want to do. That may be enough, not be enough, but I think that we need to continue to move forward with basically an American democracy is going to be one that gives us the best opportunity to create a peaceful solution and resolve the problems in the Middle East. I would also say that I know there's a lot of disaffection amongst young people. I've also seen polls that show that there are other issues that are actually at the forefront of a lot of young people's minds, having to do with housing affordability, job opportunities, and inflation and things like that. And that I think it is there are other issues, climate change, gun safety, that are also on the minds of young people, and that Democrats have a lot to offer on those issues.
Carla, do you want to speak to this? Because I think part of the difference between what people would call leftists, progressives, and centrist Democrats is a willingness to challenge the sort of neoliberal capitalist system that we're in. I think a lot of people are coming to the conclusion that this is literally killing us now, with the profits of the fossil fuel industry, with the healthcare industry. I mean, this is the reason why so many, we can't make progress on so many things, in my view. And so, and we don't have time either, right? Like with the climate crisis, we don't have a lot of time, if any, to try to turn this around. And we really need to, in my mind, reform the stock market and not make it so that we have to always have endless growth in these. I mean, these companies have taken over. Do you have any thoughts about this, and how do you speak to voters about this?
Yeah, again, I feel like voters see over 80% of Democrats support a ceasefire. It's the leaders who are not listening, and it's our country that's funding the slaughter and has for decades. And now it's just an increased slaughter that's happening in Gaza. And almost 50% of Republicans support a ceasefire. And so it is not a radical position for people to be questioning why the U.S. is paying for the horror in Gaza. That paying is also why we don't have enough money for affordable housing, for better education, for more universal health care, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that when we try to tell voters, oh no, but you probably shouldn't say anything about the ceasefire now because we just got to defeat Trump. That's how we lose people. Folks are looking for more honesty, and part of that honesty is for us to stand up and say, no, the U.S. has to stop funding what's happening in Gaza. Biden has to get a backbone and call for a serious ceasefire by saying military aid will be predicated on how Israel is acting. That's what the public wants. And we are going to be more able to go into November saying, let's unite now to defeat Trump, when we've been honest in the conversation around pushing the Democrats on Gaza and on other issues for that matter.
I just need to say we do have a caller, so we're going to take this caller and see if there's a comment or a question. Hello, caller, are you there?
Yes, this is Marcia Heath.
Hi, Marcia.
Hi, Amy. I'm appreciating, on the one hand, this broad-ranging conversation, but I think we're missing the opportunity with Tom and Laura to find out how unique Force Multiplier is and how they are acting in a very different way in order to be able to, I was going to say, support Democrats, but only those Democrats who really need the support, who are on that special way of not being obvious choices, that they're not going to be shoo-ins, and they're also not going to be impossible to vote. We can get a Democratic government so that we can move forward. And I think I'd like to hear from Laura and Tom, for them to be able to speak to your audience about how Force Multiplier works, what they do, and how is different from a lot of other organizations, and why they feel that they're making a difference. Could we do that?
Yeah, Marcia, we were going to get there, but I felt like these other issues were very important, just given the audience for the show.
They are.
So do you mind taking the answer offline? We're going to just go ahead and let them answer since you called in, okay?
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marcia, for your call. And I know Marcia's been doing some local organizing with Force Multiplier, and that people can do that in their own hometowns. So Tom, do you want to speak to what is unique about Force Multiplier? Why would people want to go to your website, share the name of the website, and also talk about what kinds of research are you doing that's making Force Multiplier specifically or especially effective?
Actually, I think I'm going to kick this one over to Laura.
Okay, great. Laura.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you, Marcia, for that question. So Force Multiplier is all about looking for candidates for the House and Senate who we believe are in a winnable race, but a very competitive race. Because, as I mentioned earlier, our strategy, our theory of change is that we can move forward on everything we've discussed tonight if we have Democratic majorities in the U.S. House and the Senate and in the White House. And so what we're trying to do is identify the candidates who need our support and introducing them to our, as I said, 9,500 friends. If you don't mind, our web address is forcemultiplierus.org. And when you get there, you can click on the word House and read about the House candidates we're supporting. Click on the word Senate for the Senate candidates. And then there's the word events. And we strongly encourage you to come to one of our events. They're on Zoom. We suggest a contribution of $100, but we welcome everybody. Whatever feels like a good contribution to you, that's what we hope for. We don't discriminate between the most modest contribution and the most generous contribution. So as I said earlier, we're supporting for example, we're supporting 5 House candidates in California. Actually, tomorrow we may be adding our 6th. Each one of these races were very narrowly decided in favor of Republicans. If we flip all of them in November and everything else holds steady in this country, Hakeem Jeffries will be the next Speaker of the United States. We're supporting 7 candidates for the Senate, 5 incumbents and 2 challengers. And if we hold on to all of those seats, we'll have a 50-50 tie, and then Vice President Harris will, make the tie-breaking vote in favor of more equitable and just United States. And these voter empowerment groups we're supporting, our feeling is that the people who are best able to identify, encourage, persuade, mobilize people to vote are their neighbors. People they sit next to in class, people they meet in the supermarket. And so we're supporting we are not going out and knocking doors. We're supporting people in these swing districts going out to knock on the doors of their neighbors over and over and over again. We were very involved in the Ohio ballot initiative to put a woman's right to choose in their constitution. And we supported the Ohio Women's Alliance and the Ohio Student Association. And they did phenomenal work getting people to the polls.
So if people donate to you, then that money will go to these organizations as you have done the research and you're surveying the landscape in the United States.
So, Amy, thank you for that summary. Just to correct it slightly, we don't take the money.
Okay.
If you go to our website and you click on a button, it'll take you to an Act Blue page where you can donate. The funds from your credit card will go directly from you through Act Blue to the campaigns or these voter empowerment groups. Force Multiplier does not have a bank account.
Okay, gotcha.
We don't really exist.
So you're like a clearinghouse for people to go and figure out.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Now I want to give the same opportunity to Carla at Showing Up for Racial Justice to talk about how people can plug in definitely before the end of the show. We also have someone locally, Angeli Dion might be calling in to talk about what you can do locally to plug in to Showing Up for Racial Justice. I know the local people here who are with Showing Up for Racial Justice, and they are some of the most amazing people we have in our whole community. You know, they're showing up for the LGBTQ plus community, they're showing up for the Black community, they're showing up for the Asian community. They are showing up. So it's a really good name. And I also, just before we go to you, Carla, to talk about Showing Up for Racial Justice, I do want to say that there have been Republicans, I believe there was one in Florida, who have already talked about just nuking Gaza. So one of my phrases is things can get worse. Like and we can lose our right to free speech. We can see the news media shut down. We can see journalists going into exile. We can see all these things can happen here, and I predict that they would happen actually under the Trump presidency. So Carla, but talk to us about what we can do with Surge National, and maybe Angeli will call in and help us with local efforts.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we use every fight to build the base for multiracial democracy. So, for instance, in the squad defender work that we've been doing in Pennsylvania, we worked with Pennsylvania United, and we had the biggest contact effort on the ground there. On the phone banks, we've built one of the strongest direct voter contact phone banks in the country, and so we now can make millions of calls. And what's different about our approach is we are talking with majority white communities, people who are being targeted by the Trumpism to stand on the side of the right instead of with multiracial democracy. And we persuade. We have a 20 to 22% persuasion rate for nerdy folks on the call who know electoral work. That's a huge, and it's because we listen to people and we talk to them about what they're struggling with, what are their families going through. It's a shared interest approach in multiracial democracy, and identify, the things like healthcare and clean air and paying off student loans and all the things that we can actually win when we stand with Black, Indigenous, and Brown communities and don't allow racism to divide us. One thing I say at the doors, and we knock a lot of doors, is I say, who is laughing all the way to the bank while they divide us based on race or immigration status?
We do have...
So folks can go to surge.org and get involved. It'll be right there, all the ways you can get involved.
Okay, Surge, surj.org. And I believe we have Angeli on the line with us, who is our local organizer, or one of our local organizers for Surge, who's been doing the Get Out the Vote work. And it recently was on, I think, a Get Out the Vote what do they call it, webinar, where everyone was calling and so forth with you. So Angeli, are you there?
I am.
Hi. Yay.
Hi there.
Could you talk a little bit about what people can do locally, or how to get in touch with you if they want to do local work with local organizers?
Sure, I'd love to. So my name's Angeli Dion. I've been working with the local Surge for about 4 years. And we basically just follow the lead of local Black, Indigenous, and people of color organizations. And as you heard before, we just literally show up and try to help advance their goals. We also work to bring more whites into the movement for racial and economic justice. And one of the ways we do that is by having a monthly call called Cultivating Care, where whites can get together and talk about white supremacy in themselves and in the world, and just have really honest discussions about all of this. Because a lot of times we read about it, we learn about it, but we don't get a chance to talk about it. We also have calling in workshops a couple times a year, which helps people, trains them how to have difficult conversations about race. so that they feel more empowered to do that. We put out a monthly newsletter, which talks about the BIPOC events going on in our area, and both in local actions, political actions, and national political actions. And recently, we've been working with MUPA, which is an organization of formerly incarcerated folks who are down in Watsonville, to look at our budget, our county budget, and our values, and just write a letter to talk with the board of supervisors about how it doesn't necessarily align. We really want to see and believe that we need more healthcare, we need more housing. Everybody knows that. We don't need to keep increasing the incarceration budget.
And Anjali, just because we're getting to the end of the show, can you give out, do you have an email that people can contact you through? And you're doing some Get Out the Vote efforts too, I believe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for keeping me on track. So our website is surgesanacruzcounty.org. And so you can go there to get more information about what we're doing locally, to sign up for our newsletter. And you can also email info@surgesanacruzcounty.org.
Okay.
And let us know you're interested.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure.
And I do have to mention one other local organization if you're in the Santa Cruz area, and that is Swing Left. They are incredibly active in getting out the vote efforts, and they're local. So they're actually having sort of like an introductory general meeting / party June 8th from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. So that's coming up this Saturday. And that's on the west side of Santa Cruz. You can RSVP, or if you have questions, go to Renee Bloch's email, renebloch@gmail.com, renebloch@gmail.com. The phone number is 408-206-2199, 408-206-2199. And just get on that email list in general, because I just will go swing by someone's house and they'll have all these postcards ready, and I just take them home, and one afternoon with some tea, my daughter will help color in, one of my daughters will help me color in the postcards, and we'll just, that's like a really easy thing you can do just at your kitchen table. The other email is Rhonda Johnson, rgjohnson123@gmail.com, rgjohnson, JOHNSON123@gmail.com. We are starting to run out of time, so I just wanted to give you each an opportunity to share just like a sentence or two, and no more than two, about what do you want to tell people out there in listener land about working on this election? Like what words of inspiration do you have, or words to light a fire under people's butts? And we're going to start with Tom.
Okay. Thanks for that, Amy. Thanks for having us on your show here. I would say the first thing is that any polls or pundits that are making you feel like this election is over, that there's preordained results, and that your efforts don't make a difference is wrong. And that one of our advisors, Mike Podhorzer, says this election is within the margin of effort. What we do makes a difference, and if people sign up for Surge or Swing Left or come to our Force Multiplier event, just get involved, do something. And folks in your area, there are two competitive House districts, 13 and 21, that are fairly near to you. Get involved with the local campaign and do something.
Thank you, Tom. We're going to go to Laura, and also, one or two sentences.
Sorry.
That's okay, Laura.
Let's win this thing in November. Let's flip the House, hold the Senate, and keep the White House blue. Let's make sure people can vote and do vote. Come to forcemultiplierus.org.
Thank you so much. And Carla, from Showing Up for Racial Justice, Carla Wallace.
Yeah, I really believe that together, when we actually go out and listen to people and talk with people, we can undermine the effort to use racism to divide us, and we can make sure that that we have the people power needed to build a real multiracial democracy in this country.
Thank you so much. And I just want to thank the three of you for your tireless work and dedication. If we did not have people like you, we would be lost. And we are not lost because we have people who are willing to put in the time. I mean, incredible amounts of research and effort and collaboration and organizing with other groups for the sake of literally keeping us on track to continue to progress as a nation, because we have come from such a flawed background, such an awful and even bloody background if we consider our own genocide. And we're trying to make it as a pluralistic nation. And that's my vision. And I want to thank you guys for trying to help make that come true. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much,
Thank you, Amy.
And you guys
nice to meet you.
Yeah, you
Carla.
too. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Carla. Nice to meet you too.
Yes, it was great to be on with all of you.
Thank you. And
you too.
We will put links in our show notes for this episode. Please contact the Moment of Truth team at Amy, AMI, at ksqd.org. That's our email with questions or comments about our program. Find our new podcast on all the podcast sites and like, review, subscribe, and comment at Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and at YouTube. Amy's coaching and education website is at www.amychen.com. Moment of Truth gives many, many thanks to our team, Nyanko Nyasu, right here on the soundboard, our sound and tech engineer, and our research and production team, Nyanko, Mei-Ling Obinata, Todd Zimmerman, and Vara Ramakrishnan. Todd Zimmerman of Nativeverse Studios created the theme song. Kathy Krizik created our logo. Thanks to our KSQD program manager, Howard Feldstein, and the entire KSQ team on the California Central Coast where this show originates. Thank you for tuning in to Moment of Truth. And remember, especially for this episode, if we don't use our democracy, we lose our democracy.